After our family reunion, I opened my banking app in my car and watched my balance refresh to almost nothing. When I confronted my family, my own son laughed and said they needed it more than I did. My hand shook as I reached into my bag and told them they wouldn't mind what came next. They laughed, right until a violent knock rattled the house and the door burst open. Before I take you through everything that led to that moment, do me a small favor. Stay with me, support this channel, and drop a comment about where you're listening from. Stories like mine travel farther when people engage, and someone out there may need to hear this more than you think. I'm Raymond Cole, and I'm not a young man anymore. I've lived long enough to know that betrayal doesn't usually come screaming at you. It comes smiling, sitting at your table, calling itself family. The reunion had been Linda's idea, my younger sister. She insisted on hosting at her place in Willow Ridge, said it had been too long since we were all together. My wife passed years ago. My social circle had shrunk, and I'll admit it felt good to be invited somewhere that wasn't a doctor's office or a quiet apartment. I brought a store-bought cake and a bottle of wine I couldn't really afford, but habits die hard. I was raised to show up properly. The house was loud when I arrived. Laughter spilled out the open windows. Music played too loudly for people my age, but no one seemed to care. My son Adrian was there with his girlfriend, stretched out on the couch like the place belonged to him. Linda's husband, Victor, leaned against the counter with a beer already in hand. My parents sat near the window, Dad scrolling on his phone, Mom pretending to listen while folding napkins over and over again. Everyone hugged me. Everyone smiled. That should have been my first warning. Dinner was chaos. Plates passed, jokes flew. Old stories got dragged out and retold wrong. Every so often, Linda would glance at Adrian and Victor, and they'd share a look that didn't include me. I noticed it, but I didn't question it. I'd spent most of my life training myself not to. After dessert, I excused myself early, said I was tired. No one argued. Adrian barely looked up from his phone when I said goodbye. It wasn't until I sat in my car, keys still in my hand, that I decided to check my account. I don't even know why I did it then. Habit, maybe, or instinct. The screen loaded slowly. Then the number appeared. I refreshed it once. Then again. Then a third time, my thumb stiff, my breath shallow. $87. Yesterday morning, I had just over $14,000. Money I'd saved carefully over years of skipped vacations, cheap meals, and extra shifts even after retirement age. It wasn't wealth. It was security. My chest tightened. I felt lightheaded. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd opened the wrong account. I hadn't. I marched back into the house without knocking. The laughter died down as soon as they saw my face. What's wrong? Linda asked, already defensive. I held up my phone. Who touched my account? Victor snorted. Actually snorted, like I'd told a joke. Relax, he said. We needed it more than you. The room went quiet for half a second. Then Sarah laughed. Mom sighed. Dad didn't even look up. My son Adrian leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. You're fine, Dad. You don't even use most of that money. My ears rang. You drained my account. It's not drained, Linda said quickly. We're family. It's temporary. I turned to my mother. You knew about this? She finally looked up at me, annoyance flashing across her face. Raymond, don't start. You've always had it easier. No kids at home. No mortgage. You're stable. So that gives you the right to take from me? Language, Dad muttered, still staring at his phone. I felt something inside me shift. Not explode. Collapse. How did you even get access? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. You left your info logged in on the family laptop last month, Adrian said. That's kind of on you. On me. My fingers curled into fists. My breathing went shallow. I realized that no one in that room looked guilty. Not one of them. You're making this a bigger deal than it is, Victor said. We paid rent, bought groceries. It's not like we blew it. You didn't ask, I said. We didn't think we had to, Linda snapped. You've been paying for stuff for years. What's the difference? That's when I reached for my bag. Not dramatically. Not quickly. just slowly enough for them to notice. "I'm leaving," I said. "You're being dramatic." Adrian laughed. "We needed it more than you. That's just facts." I paused at the door and turned back. "Then you won't mind what's coming next." They laughed again. All of them. Outside, the night air hit me hard. My cousin Natalie followed me out, concern etched across her face. "That wasn't right," she said softly. I didn't answer. If I spoke, I would have screamed. I drove away with my jaw clenched, hands white on the steering wheel. What they didn't know, what none of them realized, was that this wasn't the first time. For years, I'd been the reliable one, the stable one, the fallback plan. It started small, covering a phone bill, helping with a rent shortfall, paying for a birthday gift that somehow became my responsibility. Over time, it turned into expectation. "You're lucky, Raymond," Mom used to say. "God gave you ease so you could share it." Translation: give until it hurts, then give some more. I never asked for help. Not when I was laid off for 6 months. Not when I lived on rice and eggs to rebuild my savings. Not when I quietly paid off Linda and Victor's credit card debt 2 years earlier and never saw a dime returned. They didn't see me as a father, or a brother, or a son. They saw a resource. And that night, as I drove through empty streets with my bank balance burned into my mind, I realized something terrifying and liberating all at once. They had mistaken my patience for permission, and they were about to learn just how wrong they were. I didn't go home that night. I drove until the streets blurred into unfamiliar shapes, past closed diners and glowing gas stations, my phone vibrating endlessly on the passenger seat. I didn't answer a single call. Every ring felt like another attempt to pull me back into a role I'd finally stepped out of. Somewhere around midnight, I found myself parked in front of the Ashwood Lane house, my grandmother's old place. She'd passed years ago, but I still had the key. She used to tell me, "If the world ever turns on you, Raymond, this door will still open." That night, it did. I slept for nearly 11 hours straight. No dreams. No alarms. Just deep, heavy rest like my body had finally stopped bracing for impact. When I woke, sunlight crept through the thin curtains. The house smelled faintly of dust and old wood, familiar in a way nothing else was. I made coffee in a chipped mug and stood at the window, watching a stray cat cross the yard. For the first time in years, my chest didn't feel tight. Then my phone buzzed again. I checked it. 12 missed calls. Voicemails stacked one after another. Text spilling across the screen. "Dad, this has gone too far." "Mom, please call me." "Adrian, you're overreacting." "Linda, we need to talk like adults." No apologies. No questions about how I was. Just outrage that I'd stepped out of line. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and did something I should have done years ago. I pulled up my bank statements and went back as far as they'd let me. Transfer after transfer. Small at first, then larger. Patterns forming where I'd once seen generosity. I wasn't imagining it. This wasn't one bad decision at a reunion. It was a system. By noon, I had dates, amounts, and account numbers written down neatly. I felt calm, focused. The anger came later. That afternoon, my phone rang again. A known number. I answered. "Mason," my sister Linda said, her voice suddenly soft, almost shaky. "We have a problem." I laughed, short, bitter. "Oh, now we do?" "Don't be like that," she said quickly. "Something happened. The power company came by. We're behind. They're threatening to shut it off if we don't pay by Monday." Silence. "So," she continued carefully, "we need your help." I closed my eyes. "You drained my savings, and now you're asking for more?" "It wasn't just for us," she snapped. "We used some of it to help Mom and Dad, too. Dad's car broke down last month, remember?" "You didn't tell me." "Because you always say no when it's not an emergency." "This is theft," I said flatly. "Stop being dramatic. It's family." There was again that word, family, used like a shield, like a weapon. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay awake on my grandmother's old couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the past 5 years, every favor, every time I hesitated and was shamed for it, every time someone said, "You're the strong one," they never meant strong. They meant useful. 3 days later, my mother called. "We need to talk," she said. "Come over tonight. Just us." I almost didn't go, but part of me needed to see if they were capable of even pretending to be sorry. They weren't. When I walked into the house, everyone was already there. Linda sat with her arms crossed. Victor leaned back like he was waiting for a show. Adrian scrolled on his phone. Mom fussed with plates in the kitchen. Dad flipped through mail like nothing had happened. "So," Linda said, "are we going to act like adults or what?" "That depends," I replied, sitting down. "Are you ready to admit you committed crime?" She scoffed. "God, you're so extra." "It was family money," Victor added. "You always help." "You didn't ask," I said. "You didn't say no either," Adrian muttered. My mother finally spoke. "We all agreed you could handle it." That's when something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. Cleanly. I stood up. What you did wasn't support. It was entitlement. Linda rolled her eyes. "You don't get to cry now." I reached into my bag. This time, I pulled out paper. I slammed a printed spreadsheet onto the table. Every charge, every transfer, every date. The room went quiet. Then came the knock. 3 hard, heavy pounds against the front door. The color drained from Linda's face. Victor stood up too fast. Mom gasped. Dad froze. A voice shouted, "Financial Crimes Unit, open up." I opened the door. 3 agents stepped inside, badges visible, expressions unreadable. "Yes," I said calmly. "That's me, Raymond Cole." The lead agent nodded. "Thank you for your cooperation. We'll take it from here." And for the first time in my life, no one spoke over me. No one laughed. No one told me I was being dramatic. I stepped outside into the night air as the agents began asking questions behind me. I didn't stay to watch them escort my family out one by one. I drove away in silence. And for the first time since I was a teenager, no one was asking me for money. No one was asking me to be strong. I was finally free to just be myself. I thought the silence would feel empty. Instead, it felt wide, like a field after a storm. No voices demanding explanations. No guilt-laced apologies. Just space. The first real wave hit the next morning. Emails, one after another, all from different directions but saying the same thing in different tones. "Dad, you've humiliated us. I raised you better than this." "Mom, please, sweetheart, call me. We can still fix this." "Victor, this didn't need to involve outsiders." "Linda, you ruined everything over money." I read them slowly once, then again. What struck me wasn't the anger. It was the absence of responsibility. Not one message said, "We were wrong." Not one asked how I was holding up. Every sentence pointed outward, at consequences, embarrassment, inconvenience. At me. I didn't reply. Instead, I called my lawyer. "I want everything documented." I told him. Every message, every transfer, every call. He paused, then said something I'll never forget. "You're not overreacting. You're finally reacting appropriately." That afternoon, I went back to my apartment for the first time since the reunion. I half expected the place to feel foreign, like I didn't belong there anymore. But it didn't. It felt quiet, neutral, safe. I packed slowly. Not everything, just essentials. Clothes, documents. The old watch my father gave me years before things turned sour. I hesitated with that one, then put it back in the drawer. Some things are better left behind. As I zipped my bag, my phone rang again. Mom. I answered this time. Her voice cracked the moment she spoke. "Raymond, please. This has gone too far." "No," I said calmly. "It went too far years ago. We never meant to hurt you. You never meant to stop either." She inhaled sharply. "Your sister is terrified. Victor might lose his job. The house. You should have thought about that before you touched my account." Silence. Then, softly, You've always been a dependable one. There was again that word, dependable. The compliment that had cost me everything. I'm done paying for that role. I said, I hope you figure things out. But it won't be through me. She started crying. I didn't hang up. I just listened until the sound faded into sniffles. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. You didn't have to do it this way. I tried doing it your way. I replied. It nearly broke me. I ended the call. That night, the messages changed tone. Fear crept in. Linda, they froze my accounts. Victor, they're asking questions at work. Dad, your mother hasn't eaten all day. Still no apologies. I slept well anyway. Over the next week, the investigation moved faster than I expected. The authorities uncovered more than just my drained savings, patterns of misuse, overlapping accounts, questionable transfers going back years. Things I'd never known because I trusted the people closest to me. The irony burned. Trusting them had made me vulnerable. Questioning them had made me dangerous. One evening, I received a message from someone I barely spoke to anymore, my cousin Elias. We'd grown up together, drifted apart, exchanged polite nods at holidays. His text was short. Just so, you know, Linda's telling people you approve the transfers. Says you knew. I laughed, out loud, a deep, tired laugh. Even now, with everything collapsing, they were still trying to rewrite the story. I forwarded the message straight to my lawyer. That night, I made dinner for myself, real dinner, not something rushed between errands for other people. I put on music I hadn't listened to in years, sat at the table, ate slowly. It felt like reclaiming time. A few days later, I got an email that stopped me cold. It wasn't from my parents, or Linda, or Victor. It was from Nora, Victor's sister, the quiet one, the one who always slipped me a thank you card when no one else noticed. I know we don't talk much, she wrote, but I wanted you to know you were right. Watching this happen made me realize how much you carried for all of us. I'm sorry no one ever said thank you. I'm trying to fix my own life now. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I cried, not because of the mess, not because of the fallout, but because one person finally saw me as more than a resource. Weeks passed. The noise faded. The calls slowed. My parents stopped reaching out altogether. Linda tried once more, this time a lawyer's email attached, proposing a private resolution. I declined. I moved. New apartment. New city. New routines. I changed my number. Told my employer I needed a fresh start. To my surprise, they offered me a promotion. Said they'd notice how steady I'd been even under pressure. Funny how much energy you have when you're no longer carrying other people's weight. Some nights. The memories still crept in. The laughter at the reunion. The way they'd shrugged while I stared at my empty account. The words that stuck like splinters. We needed it more. But the memories didn't own me anymore. 3 months after that night, I stood on my new balcony, coffee in hand, watching the sun climb over unfamiliar rooftops. My phone buzzed once. A single message from Linda. I hope you're happy. I smiled, set the phone down, and didn't reply. Because for the first time in my life, happiness wasn't something I had to justify. It was something I'd finally allowed myself to have. By the 4th month, the quiet stopped feeling fragile and started feeling permanent. That was when the guilt tried one last time to claw its way back in. It arrived the way it always had, disguised as concern. A voicemail from my father left late at night. Raymond, he said, his voice tired, older than I remembered. Your mother isn't well. The stress, it's been hard on her. She keeps asking why you won't talk to us anymore. I didn't delete it. I didn't replay it either. I just let it sit there, like an object I no longer needed but hadn't thrown away yet. For days after that message, I caught myself drifting. At work, on walks, while cooking dinner. Old reflexes kicking in. The part of me trained since childhood to fix things, smooth things over, pay the cost so everyone else could breathe easier. I almost called back. Almost. What stopped me wasn't anger. It was memory. I remembered sitting at that reunion table, phone in my hand, refreshing my bank app while they laughed. I remembered my mother's knitting needles clicking calmly, as if nothing important was happening. I remembered my sister's exact words. "We needed it more than you," spoken without hesitation, without shame. And I remembered how small I felt in that moment. That memory didn't burn anymore. It steadied me. I called my lawyer instead. "Is there any legal reason I should respond to family contact?" I asked. "No," he said, "but there's an emotional one they'll keep trying to use." I figured. I replied. He paused. "For what it's worth, you're handling this better than most people." That surprised me. After the call, I took a long walk through the neighborhood. The city still felt unfamiliar, but I liked that. No history, no expectations. Just sidewalks, trees, strangers who didn't know my name or my past. Halfway through the walk, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "This is Linda." I borrowed a friend's phone. I didn't answer. Another message followed almost immediately. "Please don't ignore me. I just want to explain." Explain. That word had done a lot of damage in my life. Against my better judgment, I typed back one sentence. "You've had years to explain. I'm done listening." Dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "You don't understand what this has done to us." I stared at the screen, then locked the phone and slipped it into my pocket. I understood perfectly. A week later, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived at my new address. No return label. Inside was a cashier's check for $1,200 and a handwritten note. "I found your address through Mom's paperwork. I hope that's okay. I'm sending this because it's mine, not theirs. For the tablet, the rent, the groceries. I should have spoken up sooner. Watching you stand your ground gave me courage. Thank you for that. Nora." I read the note twice, then a third time. I didn't cash the check right away. I just sat there holding it, feeling something unfamiliar spread through my chest. Validation. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind that tells you weren't crazy. You weren't cruel. You weren't wrong. I deposited it the next day. Not because I needed the money, but because it mattered that someone chose accountability. The investigation dragged on in the background. I wasn't required to attend most of it, but my lawyer kept me informed. Accounts frozen. Charges under review. Victor placed on administrative leave. Linda's name tied to more than one irregular transfer. My parents, I learned, were scrambling, trying to refinance, trying to borrow from relatives who, interestingly, had suddenly become too busy or not in a position to help. It would have been easy to feel satisfaction. I didn't. What I felt was distance. They were becoming a story that no longer involved me. One evening, while reorganizing boxes in my apartment, I found an old photo album I'd brought without thinking. Family vacations, birthdays, holidays, smiling faces, arms around shoulders. I sat on the floor flipping through it slowly. These memories were real. The love I'd felt back then had been real too. That was the hardest part. Not that they'd taken my money, but that they'd taken advantage of something genuine. I closed the album and put it back in the box. Some things can be honored without being revisited. Near the end of that month, I got another call from my father. I let it ring out. He didn't leave a message. Instead, an email arrived later that night. "Your mother keeps asking what she did wrong. I don't know what to tell her." I typed a response, then deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Finally, I wrote one sentence and hit send. "Tell her I needed a family, not an expense account." There was no reply. Winter settled in quietly. Shorter days, colder mornings. I developed routines that felt almost sacred. Coffee at dawn, a walk after work, dinner cooked slowly instead of rushed. I started sleeping through the night. No more waking up with that old, familiar pressure in my chest. No more calculating how much I could afford to give without hurting myself. Because I wasn't giving anymore. Not money, not silence, not pieces of myself. One Saturday morning, I was grocery shopping when I heard my name. I turned to see someone from high school, Mark. We hadn't spoken in decades. "I heard what happened with your family," he said carefully. I braced myself. Instead, he smiled. Good for you. Most people never get out. I laughed, surprised. That's what it feels like sometimes. Getting out. He nodded. Yeah, took me 20 years longer. We talked for a few minutes. Ordinary things. Life. Work. Then we went our separate ways. I walked to my car feeling lighter. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I realized something important. I wasn't lonely. I was peaceful. Loneliness had a shape, a hollow ache, a craving for noise. Peace felt different. It felt steady, grounded, like standing on solid ground after years of shifting sand. I thought about the man I'd been, the one who believed love meant endurance, that being good meant being available, that family meant sacrifice without limit. I didn't hate that man, but I didn't want to be him anymore. As I turned off the lights and went to bed, one thought stayed with me, clear and unwavering. I hadn't destroyed my family. I just stopped letting them destroy me. Time has a way of changing the shape of things. By the 5th month, the chaos no longer felt like something happening to me. It felt like something that had already happened. Past tense, settled, finished. What remained were ripples, smaller and farther apart, but still occasionally brushing against the edges of my life. That was when my mother showed up. I hadn't told anyone my address except my lawyer and my employer. I was coming back from work when I saw her standing across the street from my building. Coat buttoned crookedly, purse clutched to her chest like she might drop it if she let go. For a second, I considered walking past her, pretending I hadn't seen her, protecting the quiet I'd worked so hard to build. But she saw me. Raymond, she called, her voice thin, uncertain. I stopped. She crossed the street slowly, like each step required permission. Up close, she looked smaller than I remembered. Older, her hair grayer, her eyes rimmed red, as if sleep had been scarce. I just wanted to see you, she said. You wouldn't answer my calls. I changed my number. I replied evenly. She nodded, as if she'd expected that. Your father doesn't know I'm here. That doesn't surprise me. There was an awkward silence. Cars passed behind us. Someone laughed somewhere down the block. Life continuing, indifferent. Can we talk? She asked. I thought about it. Really thought. Then I gestured toward a bench outside the building. 10 minutes, I said. That's all I have. She sat carefully, smoothing her coat. I stayed standing. I don't understand how it got this bad, she began. We were a family. We took care of each other. You took, I corrected quietly. I covered. Her mouth tightened. That's not fair. It's accurate. She looked down at her hands. Your sister is falling apart. Victor's being investigated at work. We might lose the house. I waited. You could stop this, she continued, desperation creeping into her voice. You could tell them it was a misunderstanding, that you agreed. I laughed, not loudly, not cruelly. Just once. You want me to lie to protect the people who stole from me? Her eyes filled with tears. They didn't mean it the way you're taking it. How did they mean it? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Silence. Finally, she whispered, You were always so capable. We didn't think it would hurt you this much. That sentence landed heavier than any insult. I told you hurt, I said. For years. You just didn't listen. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. 10 minutes are up, I said gently. You should go. Her face crumpled. You're really going to abandon us? I looked at her, really looked, at the woman who'd taught me right from wrong, who'd praised me for being generous, who'd also taught me, without meaning to, that my worth came from what I provided. I'm not abandoning you, I said. I'm choosing myself. She left without another word. I went upstairs, locked my door, and sat on the floor until my breathing slowed. It hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. But the pain was clean, not the suffocating kind I used to live with. That night, my lawyer called. There's been a development, he said. Your sister's attorney is proposing a settlement. They want you to sign an affidavit stating the transfers were consensual. And in return, I asked, they drop all claims. Quiet resolution. No charges. I closed my eyes. No, I said. He didn't argue. I figured you'd say that. Let it go to court, I added. I'm done carrying consequences that aren't mine. A few days later, the backlash came hard. Emails from extended relatives. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions. Aunts and uncles weighing in, urging forgiveness, urging unity, urging me to be the bigger man. I deleted them all. Funny how being the bigger man always meant being the quieter one. One message, though, stopped me. It was from my Uncle Thomas, the one person who'd never asked me for anything. I heard what happened. He wrote, I won't pretend to know all the details, but I want you to know something. Strength isn't about how much you can carry. It's about knowing when to put the load down. I sat with that for a long time. As winter deepened, the legal process ground on. I attended one hearing via video call. Saw Linda on the screen for the first time since that night. She looked thinner, tired, angry. She would meet my eyes. Victor did. His stare was sharp, resentful, like I'd personally betrayed him. I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, just distance. After the hearing, I went for a long walk. Snow crunched under my boots. The air burned my lungs. I welcomed it. It reminded me I was alive, present, no longer numb. Somewhere along that walk, I realized I hadn't thought about money in weeks. Not worried about it. Not calculated it. Not braced myself for the next request. I was free of that cycle. That realization mattered more than any outcome in court. Near the end of the month, I received one final voicemail from my sister. Mason, she said, voice hoarse, I know you think you're right. Maybe you are, but you've destroyed everything. I hope it was worth it. I listened once, then I deleted it, because the truth, the one they still couldn't see, was simple. I hadn't destroyed anything that was healthy. I'd only exposed what was already broken. And in doing so, I'd finally given myself permission to live without apology. By the 6th month, the word family had stopped echoing in my head like a command. It had become just a word again, neutral, stripped of obligation, no longer sharp enough to cut me. That shift didn't happen all at once. It happened in quiet moments I didn't notice until they were already gone. Like the morning I woke up and realized I hadn't checked my phone in hours. Or the evening I cooked dinner and didn't feel that oldish anxiety, wondering if someone would call asking for help, money, or just a small favor. Those instincts had lived in me for decades. They didn't vanish overnight. They faded slowly, as my nervous system learned something new. Nothing bad happens when you don't rescue everyone. The court date arrived in early spring. I didn't tell anyone I was attending in person. I wanted to see it through with my own eyes, not filtered through emails or legal summaries. I wore a simple jacket, nothing formal. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. They were already there when I walked in. My parents sat together, shoulders stiff, whispering urgently. Linda sat alone, arms crossed, jaw tight. Victor leaned back in his chair, projecting confidence that didn't quite reach his eyes. When Linda noticed me, her face changed. Surprise first, then something close to fear. The proceedings were dry, procedural, almost boring. Numbers, dates, records. The slow dismantling of the story they'd been telling themselves for years. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke calmly and relentlessly. Unauthorized access, repeated transfers, clear patterns. When it was over, there was no dramatic moment. No gavel slam that echoed through the room. Just a firm voice stating consequences. Accounts to remain frozen. Charges to proceed. Further review scheduled. That was it. Outside the courthouse, my father approached me. Raymond, he said quietly, please. I looked at him. Really looked. For the first time, I didn't see authority. Or disappointment. Or expectation. I saw a man who had built a family dynamic that depended on one son never saying no. I hope you get help, I said honestly. All of you. Then I walked away. I didn't feel brave. Or cruel. Or righteous. I felt finished. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread outward like cracks in ice. Extended relatives stopped calling altogether. My parents stopped emailing. Linda's lawyer tried once more, this time with softer language, more humility. It was too late. I had learned something crucial. Apologies offered only when consequences arrive on apologies. They're negotiations. I declined. Spring settled in fully. Trees bloomed. Days grew longer. I started running again, something I'd stopped years ago because I was too busy. Busy fixing, busy working, busy being needed. My body protested at first. Knees aching, lungs burning. But with every mile, I felt stronger, lighter, alive. One afternoon, as I was stretching on a park bench, a stranger sat down beside me. An older man, gray hair, calm eyes. "Looks like you're just getting back into it," he said, nodding at my running shoes. "Yeah," I replied. "Feels overdue." He smiled. Overdue things usually matter the most. We talked for a bit. Nothing deep, just weather, the park, the city. When he stood to leave, he said something that stayed with me. "You know, peace isn't loud. People mistake that." That night, I thought about all the noise I'd lived with for so long. Arguments disguised as jokes. Requests disguised as expectations. Love disguised as obligation. No wonder peace felt strange at first. A month later, I received a notice in the mail. Linda and Victor were being formally charged. My parents were listed as witnesses, not defendants, but their financial records were under review. I felt a flicker of something, sadness, maybe. Then it passed. Because consequences are not cruelty. They are reality catching up. I donated the last box of old family photos to my Uncle Thomas. I didn't want them anymore, but I didn't want to destroy them either. Some histories don't belong to one person alone. I kept nothing from that life except memories, and even those were changing shape. One evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. "Raymond?" A voice asked hesitantly. It was my father. "I just want to tell you," he said, "your mother's starting therapy. Real therapy, not church counseling. Professional." I was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad," I said, and I meant it. He exhaled. "She keeps saying she should have listened sooner. That's between her and herself," I replied. He hesitated. "Do you think someday?" I knew what he was asking. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but if there ever is a someday, it won't look like the past." He said he understood. I wasn't sure he did, but that was okay. Understanding wasn't my responsibility anymore. As summer approached, I realized something else. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had been useful at first. It had given me clarity, momentum, courage, but it wasn't needed now. It had done its job. What replaced it wasn't forgiveness. It was indifference. And indifference, I learned, is not cold. It's freeing. I could walk past memories without flinching, hear their names without tension, think of the past without wishing it had been different, because wishing had kept me stuck for years. Acceptance let me move. One night, sitting on my balcony with the windows open, I thought about the man I used to be, the one who believed love was measured by how much pain you were willing to tolerate. I raised my glass to him, not in mockery, in gratitude. He'd carried me far enough to survive, but he wasn't needed anymore. I finished my drink, turned off the light, and went inside. Tomorrow, I had a life to live, one that belonged entirely to me. By the 7th month, the past felt like a closed chapter one no longer reread. It still existed, but it didn't demand commentary. It didn't ask me to explain myself. It simply sat where it belonged, behind me. What surprised me most was how ordinary life became again. Not dramatic, not triumphant. Ordinary in the best possible way. I woke up early, not from anxiety but from habit. I made coffee and drank it slowly instead of gulping it while scanning my phone for missed calls. I worked without distraction. I cooked meals that lasted more than one night. I laughed. Real laughter, not the careful kind that checks the room first. And slowly, without trying, I started letting people in again. Not family. Chosen people. It began with small things. Conversations with co-workers that went beyond deadlines. A neighbor I started nodding to, then talking with, then sharing evening walks. A local bookstore where the owner learned my name and asked what I was reading. Connection without obligation felt strange at first. I kept waiting for the hidden cost, the unspoken expectation. It never came. One afternoon, my lawyer called with an update. "The case is moving forward," he said. "Your sister's legal team is pushing for leniency. Victor's company officially terminated him last week." I thanked him and hung up. Then I realized something unsettling. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No grief. No vindication. Just acknowledgement. That was the moment I understood I'd truly detached. When outcomes no longer define my emotional state. That evening, I received a long email from my mother. I almost didn't open it, but I did. It wasn't the same kind of message she'd sent before. No urgency. No guilt. No mention of money or court or consequences. Just words. She wrote about therapy, about realizing how often she confused control with care, about how she'd leaned on me because I was easy to rely on, without ever asking what that cost me. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask for contact. She ended with one line. "I'm learning how to sit with my mistakes without asking you to fix them." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I replied, one sentence. That's a good place to start. Nothing more. Nothing less. That night, I slept deeply. As summer settled in, my body changed. I lost weight without trying. My posture straightened. People commented that I looked younger, sharper. They were right. Stress ages you faster than time. I took a week off work and traveled alone for the first time in my life. No itinerary built around anyone else's needs. No compromise. No guilt. I drove through quiet towns, stayed in small inns, ate when I was hungry, slept when I was tired. I talked to strangers who would never know my history and didn't need to. One evening, sitting by a lake at sunset, I realized something profound. I trusted myself, not in a loud, confident way, in a quiet, settled way. I trusted that I would protect myself, that I would listen when something felt wrong, that I would never again trade my well-being for approval. That trust felt better than love ever had. When I returned, I found a letter waiting at my apartment. From Linda, handwritten. I almost threw it away. Instead, I opened it. It was messy, defensive in places, regretful in others. She wrote about fear, about how everything spiraled faster than she'd expected, about how she convinced herself that I wouldn't really be hurt. She didn't apologize directly, but she did write one sentence that mattered. "I never thought you'd stop letting us do it." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not to keep forever, just to remind myself of a truth I never wanted to forget. People don't change because you explain yourself better. They change because access ends. A few weeks later, I ran into my Uncle Thomas again. We met for coffee. He studied me over his cup and smiled. "You look settled," he said. "I feel it." He nodded. Most people confuse peace with emptiness, but peace is full. It just doesn't shout. We talked about mundane things. Weather, books, travel. He didn't bring up the family. Neither did I. At the end of the conversation, he said something that stayed with me. "You know, they'll probably tell this story for years. About how you abandoned them, betrayed them, overreacted." I smiled faintly. "I know. And you're okay with that?" "I don't live in their story anymore." He laughed softly. Good answer. That night, walking home, I thought about legacy. Not money, not inheritance. Impact. What would remain of me if I disappeared tomorrow? The answer surprised me. Not what I gave, but what I stopped allowing. Boundaries don't just protect you. They teach others what's acceptable, even if they hate the lesson. Late that summer, I received one final update from my lawyer. The case would proceed without my involvement. I wasn't required to testify further. My role was finished. When I hung up, I sat quietly for a while. Then I deleted my entire call history. Every old message. Every saved voicemail. I didn't need evidence anymore. I had moved on. On the first cool night of early fall, I stood on my balcony watching the city lights flicker on. I thought about the reunion that had started everything. The laughter, the entitlement, The moment I realized I'd been reduced to a resource. And then I thought about this moment. Stillness. Choice. Control. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't triumphant. I was free. And for the first time in my life, freedom didn't feel lonely. It felt like home. The 8th month arrived without ceremony. No phone call. No letter. No sudden twist. Just a quiet morning where I woke up and realized something important had ended. Not with a bang, but with acceptance. I no longer checked for updates from my lawyer. I no longer wondered what was happening in that house I once called home. I no longer replayed conversations in my head, trying to imagine different endings. The story had reached its conclusion, whether anyone else agreed or not. I had moved on. One evening, as autumn settled in and the air turned sharp and honest, I sat alone in my apartment with the windows open. The city hummed below, distant and steady. I poured myself a drink and didn't rush it. I had nowhere to be, no one expecting anything from me. That was still the strangest part. For most of my life, I had existed in a state of readiness. Ready to help, ready to fix, ready to give. My value had always been measured by availability. Take that away, and I'd once feared there would be nothing left. I was wrong. What was left was me. I thought back to the reunion, the moment everything cracked open, standing there with my phone in my hand, staring at a balance that no longer made sense, listening to laughter where there should have been shame. I remember the exact second something inside me hardened, not into anger, but into resolve. We needed it more than you. That sentence had followed me for months. At first, it burned, then it echoed, and finally, it taught me something brutal and necessary. When people tell you who they are, believe them. I didn't hate my family. Hate requires energy, and I no longer want to spend any on them. What I felt was clarity. They hadn't seen me as a son or a brother for a long time. They had seen me as a safety net, a solution, a quiet resource that didn't complain. When that resource closed, they panicked. Not because they'd lost me, but because they'd lost access. That distinction changed everything. A week later, I ran into my mother again, not in person, but in my inbox. A short message. No drama. I hope you're well. I'm learning how to live with the choices I made. I read it once. Then I archived it. I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, but out of respect for myself and for the boundary I'd built. Some bridges don't need to be burned. They just need to stay uncrossed. As the year moved on, my life filled in around the empty spaces. Not with noise, but with meaning. I hosted small dinners. I traveled again. I laughed more easily. I trusted my instincts. I stopped apologizing for having limits. And something unexpected happened. People treated me better. Not because I demanded it, but because I no longer accepted less. That's the truth no one tells you when you're the strong one. Strength isn't endless giving. Strength is knowing when to stop. One night, sitting quietly with a book I'd been meaning to read for years, I closed it and stared at the wall, struck by a simple realization. I was proud of myself, not for exposing anyone, not for standing my ground in court, not for watching consequences unfold, but for choosing myself when it would have been easier to fold. Pride, I learned, doesn't come from being admired. It comes from self-respect. Sometimes people ask me, carefully, if I regret it, if I'd do it differently, if I'd go back and handle things more gently. My answer is always the same. No, I regret every night I stayed silent. Every time I told myself it wasn't that bad. Every moment I convinced myself love meant endurance. But I don't regret the moment I finally said enough. Because that moment gave me something priceless. Freedom. Freedom from guilt dressed up as loyalty. Freedom from obligation mistaken for love. Freedom from a role I never agreed to play. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you've always been the dependable one, the fixer, the quiet provider, hear me clearly. You are not selfish for saying no. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. You are not abandoning anyone by choosing yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing an old man can do is finally put the weight down. And if this story resonated with you, do me one small favor before you go. Share it leave a comment about where you're listening from, and stay connected. Not because I need it, but because stories like this deserve to reach the people who need them most. This is where my story ends, and where my life truly began.